Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, dear brothers and sisters, and welcome back to the Islamic SHAHADA channel. When most people think of Islam, they imagine the deserts of the Middle East, the bustling streets of Cairo, or the vibrant mosques of Indonesia and Pakistan. Rarely does Mexico come to mind. And yet, in recent decades, Islam has quietly taken root in the very heart of Latin America. As of 2025, the Muslim population in Mexico is estimated to be between 5,000 and 10,000 people. By global standards, this may seem like a very small community. But what makes Mexico unique is not the size, but the growth. From only a handful of Muslims in the 1980s, the religion has steadily attracted new followers, both among immigrants and local Mexicans who have embraced Islam as their own. This unexpected rise is part of a global trend. Islam is currently the fastest-growing religion in the world, fueled by migration, high birth rates in Muslim communities, and a rising number of converts. And in Mexico, far from the cultural centers of the Muslim world, this global movement is leaving its mark. What's striking is how Islam has adapted to Mexico's religious and cultural landscape. In a country where over 80% of the population identifies as Catholic, the presence of Muslims, though still small, represents a new chapter in Mexico's spiritual diversity. In recent years, mosques and Islamic centers have appeared in Mexico City, Chiapas, and Baja California, offering spaces for prayer, community, and dialogue. For many Mexicans, discovering Islam is not just about adopting a new set of beliefs. It is about finding a way of life that speaks to their search for meaning, discipline, and connection. From indigenous families in Chiapas who have embraced both their Maya heritage and Islam, to young professionals in Mexico City who discovered the faith through study and friendship, Islam is slowly weaving itself into Mexico's social fabric. The story of Islam in Mexico does not begin with recent conversions or modern-day mosques. Its roots go back more than a century, carried across oceans by waves of migration, and later nurtured by local communities who found meaning in its teachings. The earliest Muslim presence in Mexico can be traced to the late 19th and early 20th centuries, when immigrants from the Middle East, particularly Lebanon, Syria, and Turkey, arrived in Mexico. Most of them were not strictly Muslims at the time. Many were Christians fleeing the decline of the Ottoman Empire and seeking better opportunities abroad. Yet among these communities, there were small numbers of Muslims who quietly practiced their faith. They settled in cities such as Puebla, Mexico City, and Monterrey, bringing with them their language, traditions, and in some cases, their religion. In those early decades, Islam was not widely known or practiced in Mexico. It was more of a private matter, sustained by a handful of immigrant families who lived far from the traditional centers of the Muslim world. For the broader Mexican society, Islam was almost invisible. But history took a turn in the 1990s, when Islam began to appear not only as an immigrant faith, but as a path embraced by local Mexicans themselves. One of the most remarkable stories unfolded in Chiapas, a region known for its indigenous Maya heritage. In the aftermath of the Zapatista uprising of 1994, when indigenous communities were searching for justice, dignity, and new forms of identity, a small number of them encountered Islam through contact with Muslim missionaries and international networks. For some Maya families, Islam offered a framework of discipline, equality, and spirituality that resonated deeply with their own traditions of community and resilience. They embraced Islam while still holding on to their indigenous identity, creating what some observers call a dual identity, both Maya and Muslim. This development was striking because it represented one of the first large-scale examples of Islam being adopted by native Mexicans, not just immigrant families. Meanwhile, in Mexico City, the country's cultural and political heart, small groups of young professionals and intellectuals began studying world religions and came across Islam. In the age of globalization and growing access to information, they were able to connect with Muslim communities abroad, read Islamic literature, and even travel to countries in the Middle East and North Africa. Some converted after personal study, while others were introduced to Islam through friendships, marriages, or academic exchanges. Another important factor in the spread of Islam was the work of international dawah organizations and visiting imams who came to Mexico in the late 20th and early 21st centuries. They provided educational resources, translated the Quran into Spanish, and helped establish Islamic centers. Globalization played a key role here. What might once have seemed a distant religion became accessible through books, digital media, and direct human contact. By the early 2000s, mosques and Islamic cultural centers began to appear in cities like Mexico City, Torreon, and Tijuana, offering a sense of community and belonging to both immigrant Muslims and New Mexican converts. Though still small, these spaces marked Islam's transition from being an invisible faith to becoming a recognized part of Mexico's religious mosaic. To understand Islam in Mexico today, we need to look at where Muslim life has taken root and how small but vibrant communities are shaping their place in the country's social and cultural fabric. Though the Muslim population is modest, estimated between 5,000 and 10,000 people in 2025, its presence is spread across several regions, each with its own story. Let us begin with Mexico City, the heart of the nation. As the largest and most diverse city in the country, it is also home to the largest Muslim community in Mexico. The iconic Polanco Mosque, also known as the Centro Cultural Islamico de Mexico, has long served as the capital's spiritual hub. It is not only a place for prayer, but also for education, cultural exchange, and interfaith dialogue. In August 2025, a new mosque was inaugurated in Mexico City, expanding access to worship and providing greater space for community events, Quran study, and youth programs. This new addition reflects both the quiet but steady growth of Islam in the capital and the need for more inclusive spaces where Muslims and non-Muslims can interact. Moving northward, the region of Baja California has become another center of Muslim life, particularly in the border cities of Tijuana, Rosarito, and Mexicali. Here, Islamic centers are active in serving not only immigrant families, but also local Mexicans who have embraced Islam. The proximity to the United States creates a unique dynamic. Muslims in Baja California often interact with Muslim communities across the border, sharing resources, hosting events, and strengthening cross-border networks. In these border towns, Islam has become part of a wider story of migration, identity, and cultural blending. But perhaps the most unique community is found in Chiapas, in the southern highlands of Mexico. In the city of San Cristobal de las Casas, a remarkable indigenous Muslim community has flourished. Since the first conversions in the late 1980s and early 1990s, this community has grown steadily. As of 2025, more than 5,500 indigenous Maya people have embraced Islam. Many of them live dual identities, holding on to their Maya traditions while practicing Islam as their faith. This blending of heritage and religion makes Chiapas one of the most fascinating examples of Islam's adaptation in Latin America. Here, mosques and prayer spaces exist alongside traditional markets and indigenous cultural life, showing how Islam has become integrated rather than isolated. In Guadalajara and Monterrey, two of Mexico's most important industrial and educational hubs, Muslim communities are also on the rise. Guadalajara, with its reputation as a cultural capital, attracts students and professionals who are exposed to global ideas, including Islam. Small but growing groups gather for Friday prayers, often in rented spaces or cultural centers. In Monterrey, a city known for its strong business ties and international exchange, the Muslim population continues to expand, supported by both immigrant families and new converts. These communities may not yet have large mosques, but they are steadily building the foundation for future growth. What ties these communities together is their diversity. In Mexico City, the Muslim community is cosmopolitan, shaped by immigrants, diplomats, students, and converts. In Baja California, it reflects the cross-border identity of border towns. In Chiapas, it represents an indigenous reimagining of faith, where Islam becomes part of local traditions. And in Guadalajara and Monterrey, it mirrors the global reach of cities that are open to cultural and religious diversity. The story of Islam in Mexico is not only about migration or the survival of immigrant traditions. Increasingly, it is a story of conversion, of Mexicans who, born and raised in Catholic families, are turning toward Islam in search of something deeper, clearer, and more structured. For many, the journey begins with a spiritual search. Mexico has long been one of the most Catholic countries in the world, but in recent decades, there has been a gradual shift. Some people feel that mainstream religion no longer answers their questions or gives them the clarity they seek. For these men and women, Islam appears as a faith of simplicity, discipline, and meaning. Its central belief in one God, its structured daily prayers, and its emphasis on moral responsibility provide a framework for life that feels refreshing and authentic. Others are drawn by the promise of a new identity. In a world where many feel disoriented by social change, economic uncertainty, or moral confusion, Islam offers what some Mexicans describe as stability, moral clarity, and a strong sense of belonging. The Muslim community in Mexico, though small, is known for being tightly knit. Converts often speak about the deep sense of brotherhood and sisterhood they discover in Islam, an environment where they are welcomed as family, regardless of their past. For many, this sense of community fills a gap left by a society where traditional family and community bonds are sometimes weakened by modern pressures. Social contact also plays a critical role. Many conversions begin with a relationship, a friendship, a marriage, or even casual encounters with Muslims in everyday life. In Mexico City, young professionals might meet Muslims through academic exchange programs or business networks. In Baja California, people encounter Islam through cross-border connections with the United States, where Muslim communities are larger and more visible. And in Chiapas, entire families have embraced Islam after years of dialogue and contact with visiting Muslims. In each case, it is not abstract doctrine that first opens the door. It is human interaction. But perhaps the most transformative factor in recent years is digital access. Today, Mexicans can discover Islam without ever stepping foot in a mosque. Platforms like YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook are filled with videos explaining Islamic beliefs, showing Muslims around the world practicing their faith, or sharing personal stories of conversion. Spanish-language content has especially grown, making Islam accessible to anyone with a smartphone. Online Quran translations, virtual study groups, and global networks of Muslim influencers have brought Islam directly into Mexican homes. For many, the first spark of curiosity comes not from a sermon in a mosque, but from a video watched late at night on their phone. It is also important to note the religious background of most Mexican converts. The majority were raised Catholic, reflecting Mexico's deep Catholic heritage. Yet, as surveys suggest, fewer young Mexicans today attend church regularly compared to their parents' generation. Many converts describe their transition as a search for moral clarity and structure, something they felt was missing in their previous religious life. Islam, with its daily discipline of prayer, fasting during Ramadan, and clear rules of conduct, provides not only spirituality, but also a practical structure for everyday living. When we speak about Islam in Mexico today, we are not just speaking about migration, mosques, or statistics. At its heart, this story is about people, individual Mexicans who, through their own journeys of questioning, searching, and discovery, have chosen to embrace Islam. These stories are diverse, spread across regions and backgrounds, but together they reveal how Islam is no longer only the religion of immigrants. It is now part of the lived reality of Mexicans themselves. One of the most striking examples comes from Chiapas, in the southern highlands of Mexico. Here, entire families of Maya origin have embraced Islam over the last 3 decades. For these families, conversion was not about abandoning their indigenous heritage, but about expanding it. Many still speak their native languages, wear traditional clothing, and celebrate Maya cultural festivals, while at the same time living as practicing Muslims. This dual identity, Maya and Muslim, is not seen as a contradiction, but as a fusion of 2 traditions that both value community, discipline, and respect for nature. In villages around San Cristobal de las Casas, it is not unusual to see a family maintaining Maya customs at home while attending the mosque for prayer. This blending of worlds illustrates how Islam in Chiapas has become rooted in local identity rather than being seen as foreign or imposed. In Mexico City, the stories take on a different shape. Here, many of the new Muslims come from urban, educated, and professional backgrounds. Some are university students who, while studying comparative religion or philosophy, encounter Islam and are struck by its intellectual depth and clarity. Others meet Muslim peers through international programs, cultural exchanges, or simply by living in a cosmopolitan city where diversity is part of daily life. For many of these young professionals, conversion represents not only a change of faith, but also a redefinition of purpose. A decision to live a disciplined, meaningful life in a fast-paced, often fragmented modern world. Their stories reflect a Mexico that is increasingly globalized, where exposure to different worldviews can inspire new paths of belief. Along the northern border in Baja California, the picture looks different again. In cities like Tijuana, Rosarito, and Mexicali, conversions often happen through direct contact with the international Muslim community. Because of the region's proximity to the United States, Muslims frequently cross the border for business, education, or family life. Local Mexicans who interact with them, whether as colleagues, neighbors, or friends, sometimes find themselves drawn to the values and practices of Islam. In many cases, a simple friendship becomes the first bridge, an invitation to a mosque, a conversation about faith, or an introduction to Ramadan. These borderland conversions are living proof of how global Islam connects with local Mexico, creating hybrid communities shaped by cross-border exchanges. The growth of Islam in Mexico, while inspiring, is not without its difficulties. For a community that numbers between 5,000 and 10,000 people, its presence is small compared to the country's overwhelmingly Catholic majority. And yet, it is precisely in this minority position that both the challenges and opportunities of Islam in Mexico become most visible. Let us begin with the challenges. The first is the weight of negative stereotypes. Like in many parts of the world, Islam is sometimes misunderstood in Mexico. News headlines about global conflicts, terrorism, or extremism often overshadow the everyday reality of Muslims who live peaceful, productive lives. For many Mexicans, the first association with Islam is not prayer, family, or community. It is an image shaped by fear. This means that converts often face questions from friends and family, sometimes even suspicion or discrimination. While acceptance is growing, overcoming stereotypes remains one of the greatest obstacles to building a truly inclusive religious landscape. Another challenge is the limited number of mosques and Islamic centers. As of 2025, there are 321 mosques and prayer spaces registered across Mexico, a significant increase compared to only a few decades ago, but still not nearly enough for a country of more than 120 million people. For many Muslims, especially those living outside major cities, the nearest mosque may be hours away. This limits not only access to regular worship, but also opportunities for cultural exchange and community building. For a faith that relies heavily on community life, Friday prayers, Ramadan gatherings, and Eid celebrations, the lack of infrastructure is a major hurdle. A third challenge is the lack of formal Islamic education in Mexico. While there are cultural centers and informal study groups, there are very few institutions that provide structured religious training. Young Muslims who want to learn more about their faith often rely on online resources or travel abroad to places like Spain, the United States, or the Middle East. This dependence on external sources makes it difficult to cultivate a strong, homegrown Islamic scholarship in Mexico. Without trained imams and local teachers, many communities feel a gap in religious leadership and guidance. Yet, for every challenge, there are also opportunities, and these may prove to be the seeds of Islam's growth in the decades to come. One of the most promising signs is that young Mexicans are increasingly open to diversity. Across Latin America, there is a generational shift taking place. Younger people are more likely to explore new ideas, to question traditions, and to embrace global cultures. This openness creates fertile ground for Islam to be seen not as foreign, but as another valid path within Mexico's pluralistic society. At the same time, interfaith dialogue is becoming more accepted. In cities like Mexico City and Guadalajara, Muslims have participated in events alongside Catholics, Protestants, Jews, and even indigenous spiritual leaders. These dialogues build bridges, reduce fear, and create spaces for mutual respect. For many Muslims, these encounters are opportunities to present Islam in its true form, as a religion of peace, compassion, and community. Perhaps the greatest opportunity, however, lies in the digital age. With smartphones in nearly every hand, Mexicans now have unprecedented access to the global Muslim community. Social media platforms, YouTube, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, are filled with Spanish-language Islamic content, Quran recitations, lectures, personal testimonies, and even live discussions with scholars abroad. Digital dawah has transformed the landscape, allowing people in remote towns or rural areas to connect instantly with Muslims across the world. For a small community, this global network is a powerful tool of empowerment. It not only strengthens the faith of individual Muslims, but also provides a sense of belonging to a much larger ummah, the worldwide Muslim community. When we look ahead, the story of Islam in Mexico is one of steady, patient growth. The numbers may be small compared to the country's overwhelmingly Catholic majority, but they tell a story of resilience and continuity. Islam in Mexico is no longer just a legacy of immigrants from Lebanon, Syria, or Turkey. It is increasingly shaped by local Mexicans who find in the faith a new moral compass and a renewed sense of community. The driving force behind this growth is conversion. Every year, more Mexicans, especially young adults, choose to embrace Islam. Their reasons are deeply personal: a search for clarity, a desire for discipline, or a longing for a spiritual tradition that connects everyday life with divine purpose. For many, Islam's message of simplicity, unity, and responsibility resonates in a way that feels fresh and transformative. Yet the road ahead is not without challenges. Islam in Mexico continues to face stereotypes, fueled by global narratives of extremism and misunderstanding. Despite recent progress, the number of mosques and Islamic centers is still limited, especially outside major cities. Formal Islamic education remains scarce, leaving many new Muslims to rely on informal study groups, online resources, or international networks. These challenges remind us that Islam in Mexico is still young, still finding its place in the national religious landscape. But where there are challenges, there are also opportunities. Mexico's younger generations are growing up in a world that is more global, more connected, and more open to diversity. Interfaith dialogue is expanding, particularly in academic and urban settings, offering spaces where Muslims can share their faith and build bridges of understanding. Digital platforms, whether YouTube, TikTok, or online lectures, are helping to connect Mexican Muslims with teachers and communities across the world, creating a virtual ummah that sustains and inspires them. Looking toward the future, Islam in Mexico may never be a dominant faith, but it is carving out a unique and enduring presence. It stands not only as a spiritual path, but also as a symbol of Mexico's evolving diversity. In Chiapas, Islam has already taken root among the Maya, blending indigenous identity with global faith. In Mexico City, professionals, students, and families are building communities that reflect a modern, cosmopolitan Islam. On the borderlands of Baja California, Islam grows as part of Mexico's dialogue with the wider world. What emerges is a picture of resilience. Islam in Mexico will continue to grow, not through mass migration, not through political power, but through personal conviction and grassroots community building. It will continue to be a faith of searchers, thinkers, and families who see in Islam a new chapter for their lives. And in this way, Islam in Mexico is not just about numbers or institutions. It is about a transformation, quiet, steady, and profound. It is about Mexicans writing their own chapter in the global story of Islam, a chapter that reflects their history, their struggles, and their hopes for the future. Islam in Mexico cannot be reduced to numbers, statistics, or charts. It is, at its core, a story, one of search, discovery, and faith. Every person who embraces Islam brings with them not only a new identity, but also a new perspective, adding another voice to Mexico's diverse spiritual landscape. From the descendants of Middle Eastern immigrants who arrived more than a century ago, to the indigenous Maya families in Chiapas, to young professionals in Mexico City, Islam in Mexico is a journey woven from many different paths. What unites these stories is not just religion, but transformation, the courage to seek, to question, and to embrace a faith that redefines one's life. The future of Islam in Mexico will not be written in isolation. It will unfold through conversations across faiths, through digital connections with the global Muslim community, and through the daily lives of ordinary Mexicans who find in Islam a new moral clarity and sense of belonging. In the end, Islam in Mexico is more than a faith practiced by a minority. It has become part of the evolving identity of the nation itself, an identity that is increasingly diverse, resilient, and open to new chapters. And as each new convert takes their place within this story, the future of Islam in Mexico continues to be written, one heart, one family, and one community at a time. Thanks for watching until the end. I hope it was useful. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.